I'm Dr. Emma Fisher, and I'm a puppeteer, I'm a theatre artist, I'm an animator, I'm a researcher around puppetry and disability, and I'm an educator, and I also have a disability. I'm an artist, and part of my practice is working in community. I used to think the community was when I worked in hospitals and schools, in community centres, but when I was working on my PhD production of Pupa, I realised that community was far wider. There were artists, there was a huge collaboration of professional artists, students, and then we did a call out and other people came in and helped us, and it was a huge community project. I'm just going to show you a really quick clip.
I don't know how many people running in and fixing parts of the set and that. So when we were building up, there was so many people here. I didn't know who was who, and I just had to get on with things.
While we had an excellent professional group of people working on Pupa, we also were able to link in with Mary Immaculate College and get some of the students from their new drama course to be a part of the project. Because Emma's doing her PhD there and Dr. Michael Finneran was supervising her, we had a wonderful link with the college and a lot of support through that.
The great thing about Pupa was there's such a huge team behind it, and it's just amazing how many people got involved.
They did it because they cared, and they cared about Emma and getting her work out there. And that's what makes this the most beautiful production, because it is community. And that idea of ensemble, everybody working together towards a common goal. And this goal was bringing Pupa to life and helping Emma in any way we could.
So I'm going to flag it now. I am not a musician, but I'm a puppeteer, and puppeteers rely on musicians. We don't work without them. When I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my research now, which is all around puppetry performance and disability. When I started my research, I sort of Googled puppetry and disability to see, what research was out there around professional puppeteers with disabilities creating work, and I couldn't find anything. What I could find was a lot of research around able-bodied puppeteers working with people with disabilities. And while that is very valid, and as community artists, we do go out there and we help lend voice to everyone in the community, the thing that was missing from the story seemed to be the research around people making stories about their own disabilities. I'm happy to report that that has changed, and now I Googled it in preparation for this presentation, and the same thing, and I found articles from Marina Tesplini, Karina Dunn, and myself, and on the first page, and I realized that it's amazing, like 3 voices, there's more, but they can make such a shift, and I'm not an expert in community music, I'm not a musician, but as a person with a disability and as an artist, I can see a need across the board for new conversation to join the table. Last year I delivered a 3-day workshop with Family Theatre in Denver in America, and Reagan Linton is the artistic director, and the company is made up of disabled artists. And she asked me to come and teach them, work with them and teach for 3 days on puppetry, because she couldn't find anyone nearby who was both an educator and a puppeteer with a disability, and that spoke volumes to me. As a community musician, artist and researcher, one of your goals is to help others find a voice. And along that path you will find and add to yours. I like to tell my students that research inspires practice and practice inspires research. But when I was doing my research, I had no idea that my identity was going to inspire my research. Art has, of course, always been a means for an artist to understand their own identity. My research and my art are now one and the same. While the researcher tends historically not to be part of the research, Scalar suggests that to understand a participant's story of their body, which in her case is through dance, mine through puppetry, and yours through music, we cannot separate our own bodies from our research. In fact, it is essential in order to facilitate others. However, you have to be very careful when you work with a group of people whose voice historically has been suppressed, like that of people with a disability. Their voice needs to lead into the conversation around the development of the work. The center of this statement is their own voice, which is such an important part. Puppeteers and musicians with disabilities have a unique voice, and the puppet and the music is a great tool to tell their story. If artistic training becomes more open, the artistic world becomes more diverse, more interesting, with more voices with deep and interesting stories to tell. In addition, if you're going to train a person with a disability in an artistic discipline, it really demands that you look at the discipline as a whole and develop new definitions of what success will look like. If you have a very limited scope of what you're trying to achieve as the end product, it's very possible that the artist with a disability won't fit into that. Not because they aren't a good performer or puppeteer or theatre artist or musician, but because their good looks different. So it demands a whole overhaul of the process. It's a quote from Regan Linton, Artistic Director of Family. In 2009, I began working with Helium as a puppeteer in residence on the Cloudlands project. And I also, the Puppet Portal project, and then later I started working on the Cloudlands project. As someone who had spent a lot of time in hospital as a child, I know firsthand what a scary experience it can be. It was especially rewarding to work in isolation wards, one-on-one with the teenagers. These were the children that really needed something to do. They had to find a voice to express their experiences and or distraction from their reality. In the world of the hospital and in the home of a sick child, real life temporarily stalls to be replaced by a different, hopefully brief existence for the young person. The hospital is a place of medical procedures, sounds of beeps, operations, and in the world of the hospital, the medical model of illness and disability is at the forefront. The medical model links directly to the person's diagnosis and to their body. The aim is to cure or manage the damage caused by illness or disability. However, this view mainly categorizes the disability illness rather than the person. What the artist brings with them is the social model of disability and illness. They are solely interested in the young person's voice, their narrative. By being the one non-medical component, they bring with them the reality of outside, while also carrying a bag of tools that can transform their environment and their story into the realms of fantasy. The children, instead of just being patients, are artists, puppeteers, musicians, and storytellers, transforming themselves into astronauts and their surroundings into space. What we bring is the person whose main focus is not a health benefit. We are not medical professionals. We are artists, and we have come to collaborate with another artist. This is key when working with young people or old people. You are an artist and you are collaborating with another artist. My first residency in Galway Hospital for Cloudlands, the very first person I met was a teenage girl, and she was 16 and she had an ambition to be a songwriter. And when I went in, I had prepared these boxes and I got her to pick one, and inside there was a ball of wool, and I asked her to tell me what she thought of when she saw this wool. And she surprised me and she said that the wool reminded her of her veins and that her veins were made of wool. And then she decided that she really wanted to turn the box that it came into a bed to make the bed that she was in a more fantastic bed. And she covered it in wool, and this is the bed here that she made. But while she made it, she told me about her wish to be a songwriter, and she started writing a song based on the wool and the bed. And so some of the lyrics are here. So I'll just read some of them out to you. She loved to sing and draw and dream. She dreamt of Indian food and Italian boys. And when she dreamt, musical notes flew around the box that was the bed. Around the box that was the bed. And she made this box into a bed. She made this box into a bed in her head. There is a girl who made a box into a bed. Her veins are wool, her veins are wool. Her veins are wool. She made a box into a bed. So I asked my friend Moira Brady Averill, who is a professional musician as well as puppeteer and comedian, if she would mind recording the song so that we could give her a professional copy of the song. And she did, and it was beautiful, and she was delighted to receive it. And so she was able to collaborate with another musician to make that happen. And then the year later, I came across another musician. There's a lot of musicians in Galway Hospital. And I was quite far into the project at this point when I came across her. And the project had developed from a teenage boy at the beginning who had done a painting and called it 72 Chances of Survival. And I decided I wanted to link all of the different children in the different isolation rooms. And so I had this idea that I would bring this painting in, and then the next child saw it and they wanted to come up with a little story about their chance. And so it grew, and every time I went into a new room, I brought the preceding stories, and then the book 72 Chances emerged. And then this musician who I met later on, she decided, she wanted to make a music video, and I was with her for 3 days and we made this beautiful animation music video, but she also was really interested in the book. And so she agreed for me to send her like all of the stories at the end of the project, and I sent her a recording device. And she made up this beautiful song to go with all of the people's stories. And when I put it together and I made it into a film, and so they got the book in the post, and they also got a DVD with a music video with their work on it. So I'm just going to show you a clip of that now.
First Irish woman on the moon, a unicorn and a dinosaur, deep sea diver in the ocean blue. You can do whatever you want to. If you had a chance, would you take it? Would you jump in?
Okay. So they're an example of two of the community musicians in my opinion, that I worked with in hospitals over the course of 2 years of residency. So you land into their room in the hospital. Their parents, their nurses, their doctors, they're coming in, they're coming out. They're in a really vulnerable place when you get there, and they've let you in, and there's an amazing amount of trust that you have to gain. And so I like to tell the children when I get there about my injury and about my time in hospital, and I let them ask questions if they want. And it's just a way for me to also be vulnerable and for us to start on an equal footing. So I would suggest that if you do end up working in a hospital or in a health context like this, that if you do have a story about being in hospital yourself, then I think it's very useful to share that experience with the young person. One of my collaborators in the PhD research, he told me that he used to do this as well when he worked with children, that when he was younger, he had a teacher who was a guitar player and songwriter who taught him how to sing and play the guitar. And through this, he really gained a voice, and he really wanted to go out there and help other people find their artistic voice. And then he was saying that while he was out there, he was working with one girl who was very shy, and he saw her emerge through the music as well. And he now says that she's a facilitator and she's out there doing it. So this amazing sort of echo of voices being returned. And so we echo this in Pupa, where the audience come across a conductor who is conducting mouths in jars. These represent the mouths that have been stolen from people with disabilities. And one of the other characters who gets his mouth given back to him, and as such his voice, decides that he is to head out and return voices to others that have had them taken. So it kind of echoes the story of my collaborator from earlier. The puppet that represented me as well in Pupa has her voice stolen by the characters Cat and Fox, who represent society. And by taking puppet Emma's voice away, Cat and Fox take the very thing that would liberate her. So Noshella 2008 says, "To control others is to take away their experience. for their experience is what unites them to create a collective identity, which aids in developing a social movement. So music and puppetry both have a history of breaking down barriers and being used as a voice for those oppressed. So I posit that puppetry and music can be used as a way to break through the acoustic barrier and reclaim the voice of those that have been othered, such as people with disabilities. I'm not saying that the only community musicians who can work with people with disabilities are those who have disabilities, but it is important that the voice is present, consulted with, and would be great to have more facilitators who do. Seeing someone who looks like you doing what you want to do is so empowering and inspiring and has such a knock-on effect. Crew 2017 discusses why the authentic voice is necessary, citing the 1995 UK Disability Discrimination Act slogan, "Nothing about us without us," and stating that people with disabilities need to be consulted when writing and performing disabled characters, so as not to remove these characters from the reality of disability. With my work within the hospital, I had one teen tell me she could not make a puppet because of her nerve damage. She had not realised that I had exactly the same injury as her. It was amazing to see her reaction when I pointed this out. And not only did she make the puppet, but she made a performance for the puppet. In Pupa, I collaborated with composer Gunther Burkes. Gunther was diagnosed with MS in his late 40s. He was at the time a professional saxophone player, and his music identity was really linked to his self-identity. As his health deteriorated, he could no longer play the saxophone, which led him to cease playing altogether. He quotes, "As far as I was concerned, I wouldn't qualify for the label live musician anymore. I was Gunther the musician, and then I wasn't." One of Gunther's musical inspirations was the percussionist Dame Evelyn Glennie. And in 2011, he saw the film Touch and Sound. In it, she speaks about her experience about being profoundly deaf, something that Gunther did not realise. And this revelation brought on such a change in him, and he was inspired, and he returned to creating music. Gunther, I can do it. I can't play the saxophone, but there are instruments I can play. This led to Gunther purchasing a waterphone for his 60th birthday and his return to playing live music. It also widened the scope of what he felt music was. He started looking at the entire world as his instrument. He collected sounds from the world using a digital recorder and using these recordings to create new music. He collected sounds wherever he went, from natural sounds such as water to sounds of objects being played like percussion instruments, and he then digitally explores these sounds through turning them into compositions. Now, he did this a lot for the soundscape of Pupa, and he created this really beautiful and haunting soundscape. And I just want to show you a minute of him talking about one of the soundtracks he created for us.
I was in hospital, and I had all those beeps and things going on around me, and they were falling into position and creating a soundscape. And I then had the idea I'd like to make a piece of music out of this. And between one thing and another, I never got around to doing it. But then Pupa gave me an excuse or the motivation to actually go ahead and make that piece of music.
Gunther wrote to Evelyn Glennie to thank her for being the turning point that had inspired him to return to music. They later met and spoke about the different ways one could create music in this very university. Gunther used his experience to inspire other people to make music. He tried to change how people perceive and define music with Cork City Gamelan. He believes that anyone can make music. In terms of his personal journey, Gunther had created a way of defining himself by what he does with music and has reclaimed his self-identity. I'm not a disabled person, but a person who has a disability. I am not a musician. I am someone who makes music. Gunther's approach to his identity led to him being comfortable in his own skin once more. And it is this lesson that inspired the relationship between Gunther the caterpillar, seen here in this picture, and Puppet Emma, also seen in the picture, in my play Pupa, him a mentor, me a mentee. Talking to Gunther for those early years in my research helped me reassess my disability and led to me accepting it. We have just released the documentary last week for Pupa, and for one night only, we're going to show the filming of the tech tonight. And we decided to do this to dedicate it to our good friend Gunther, who passed away last month. Okay, so accessibility. The performance space is very exclusive. Every stage and podium needs to be accessible, not just with the ability to put in a ramp if needed. It needs to be accessible all the time, otherwise we're singling people out. Access needs to be something that all of us who work in community are aware of. Rehearsal space on the ground floor, there's so much, but we have to be aware of it, and we need to try and make the world more accessible. When you're in the room working within communities, you need to ask yourself, who is not in this room? Why are they not in the room? How can I help to facilitate to make it that they are? If you are a facilitator who does not have a disability, you must rely on the voice of the members, collaborators in the room who do. Ask yourself, who is the lead artist? What is the people in the room getting from this experience? Do not try and lead them into a vulnerable space that they're not trained to be in. The space is to express, but not a therapeutic intervention. So in conclusion, you're there to partner with the community. You're facilitating their voice, but your voice is at the table. You're part of that community. Everyone in the community should be learning. That's what's been learned depends on the person and their starting perception. You need to be prepared to learn a lot about your own self-conceived notions, about how someone interacts and what they do. The people who know best what they can do is the person themselves. It's good to ask yourself, what did you come in with, and how did your perceptions change? Let's make community arts more open, accessible, with the voice of the community at its core. Thank you.